everyone. Thanks for having me to the conference. I was excited to be selected to present, and I want to thank Leanne for all the cat herding that she did in the past few weeks. And I'm going to talk. This is my first ever basic income conference. I spent 10 years or so as an advocate on various policy campaigns, communications and media campaigns, and now I work for the City of Philadelphia in the Office of Adult Education. And my previous experience was education policy for children on a pre-K campaign and also K-12 campaign. I'll talk a little bit about that, my experiences later. And this PowerPoint I'm about to present is really just a summary of my experiences with coalitions, building Grasstop's coalitions. I have been a grassroots organizer. I abandoned it in frustration, recognizing that the Grasstop's folks were the decision makers and that you could go more directly to elected leaders and other influencers like their top donors with ideas and an immediate audience. I think that there's absolutely a place for grassroots organizing and that things will definitely move faster if there's 1,000 people in the streets also demanding it, but that Grasstop's coalition building is effective. And why do we care about this? As I mentioned, influencers and decision makers are at the table, and this is really important. I have a link in here. Hopefully it doesn't mess up my slide sequence here, but the link goes to a Gallup poll that shows the public's perception about how much they are able to influence elected leaders. 14% of, the results are that how do elected leaders become influenced? How do we sway Congress? And this is essential, of course, if you believe that basic income is the role of government, then that means you must engage with Congress, you must engage with the political process. And this is a real reality check, in my view, for how Americans think they are able to influence what happens. If we have only 14% of the public believing that a phone call to their congressperson will make a damn bit of difference, we have a real challenge in front of us with grassroots organizing. Here's a quick outline of what I'm going to go through today. In my view, the 5 keys to successful advocacy and coalition building. This is entirely anecdotal from my personal experience, being involved with about 5 different coalitions with different policy goals. It's not based on academia or research or independent evaluation. This is purely subjective, and I really appreciate you indulging me this today. A case study in pre-K for PA, why it hit those 5 keys and was therefore successful. Pre-K for PA was about a $3 million advocacy campaign that yielded tens of millions of dollars in additional investment from the state of PA, which is broke, but they're still finding a way to invest in early childhood education despite their dire budgetary constraints. And in my view, that's a result of successful advocacy. And then lastly, I'll finish with a probably, strategic proposal for BIG. This is something I've thought about. As I've said, I'm new to the issue and just looking at it kind of from the outside, almost skeptical, not entirely skeptical. My proposal is at the end of the presentation. So in my view, the 5 keys to successful advocacy are evidence, resources, consensus, clarity, and mapping. I'm going to walk through these 5 things quickly. Evidence means research and polling. You need consistent, compelling research that is credible, has large sample sizes, is consistent research to research. So for example, no matter what comes out of the Kenya basic income pilot, it's not relevant to the United States. It's not relevant to industrialized countries. So it has to be voluminous. There has to be tons of it. Pre-K didn't happen in this country until there was 50 years of compelling and consistent research indicating that quality pre-K was really great for little kids and really great for families. It took us 50 years. And in fact, the research that American universities created in this country was used by other countries. to pilot their programs about 25 years ago. China has been doing quality pre-K using American academic research as the basis and as the reason for that for about 2 decades. Wait a second, polling's really important. If the academics agree that something should happen, but the public doesn't want it, it's not going to happen. Elected leaders who make decisions live and die by polling. They are not going to do things that are not popular. They're not going to do things that, in fact, both of these things go hand in hand. If the polling is overwhelming and the research is shaky, it can still happen because the people are expressing that they want it. Case in point, marijuana legalization. The evidence is shaky that it's medicinal. There are no good case studies around the medicinal effects of cannabis, yet the polling is overwhelming and compelling that the public favors legalization of medical cannabis, and therefore politicians are being led by that polling. So these two things going together, the people have to want it and the evidence has to be there. These are two really important things when it comes to evidence, in my view. Advocacy campaigns need resources. Relying on a network of volunteers, no offense to anyone in the room, is not going to get effective advocacy done, right? Volunteers. Pardon?
It's offensive when you say that.
I
say no offense. I think it's offensive.
This is just my experience. I've been involved in a lot of volunteer organizations.
How many years? How poor are you? How can you say it's
And please hold your comments.
I'm sorry, but I don't want to hear somebody who says no offense.
And please hold your comments till later.
I mean, I think it's important to recognize that talent matters, whether they're being paid or not paid. Talent matters, and that's resources that needs to come to a movement. So granted, there's probably amazing volunteers who bring professionalism to the campaign, but advocacy campaigns, in my experience, that are successful are ones that are staffed by people with expertise in media relations, politics, and have an experience as advocates, not single issue volunteers. Funding must also be adequate. You must have an honest conversation about the funder of your coalition campaign. 3 years is the minimum, really, to show any sort of results. It must be adequate enough to retain the people who are doing the work, the staff that are doing the work. This is a really important thing for a coalition. There's a lot of people advocating, for instance, for a federal jobs program, a jobs guarantee. There's the guaranteed livable income. There's basic income. Just coming to this as an outsider, I see that there's a lot of slight variation in what people want and what they're advocating for. And those people that almost agree with each other need to come together and figure out, what do they all agree on? What are the top 3 things that all the people who are almost in agreement with each other and have common goals, they need to ally instead of fight with one another, because it undermines the momentum if the people who are 90% in agreement are fighting each other. Great example of this is people advocating for the $10 minimum wage fighting with the people who advocate for the $15 minimum wage. That's people who agree that the minimum wage has to be increased. And so if they're fighting with one another, that really undermines the momentum for a movement and undermines the strength of a potential coalition. And how do you know that someone's a good ally? Someone is a good ally beyond lip service. They commit time, they commit money, they send their organizational decision makers to the table and dedicate real insight, and they're engaged in the coalition meetings, they're engaged in the coalition conversations. They're authentic and honest. The most difficult part of creating internal consensus at a coalition is understanding the self-interest of each group that's at the table. Everybody is there for a different reason, and they have to understand why everyone else is there. What are the selfish reasons that everyone else is at the table? And then the big tent openness to other people, other issues. It was touched on this morning. Someone mentioned the Sierra Club as a potential ally on basic income. So we would want to have a coalition that's open to people who maybe agree with us 60% of what we agree on. And that would be a place, the coalition meetings, the coalition table would be a place where people could, disagree with one another and still come back the next month to work out the thing. So it's an openness to disagreement in order to meet the goal of consensus. So it's kind of like airing your dirty laundry inside, having your family arguments inside the house. But when you go out in public, nobody picks on your little sister. That's a really strong coalition, one that can yell at each other inside the room and then go out of the room and stick up for each other in the media conversations and against people who are against your goals. Another key to effective Grasstop's coalition building is clarity. Clarity is important on two levels. When your coalition is clear in your message, you get the attention of Grasstop's influential leaders because you are showing them how effectively you communicate. And they know that when you leave the meeting with them, you're talking to everybody else just as effectively, right? That you're to the point, you're hitting on core values, you have a resonant message that makes sense to everybody regardless of their education level. That sort of communication scares the bejesus out of Congress people. When you come in with a 50-page report, they don't worry at all because they know a 50-page report is not going to be read by anyone out of that room. But when you come in with 3 bullet points and you're dynamic and you're passionate and you're to the point and you're hitting on core American values and they know that your message will resonate with people outside of that meeting with a congressperson, it scares them. That's why clarity matters, because it makes Grasstop's people sit up straight. Simplicity matters. What problem will be solved? Who are the best messengers? What will we all say together? So a key part of a coalition is the external messages that you send out there. They have to be consistent, whether they're coming from the Sierra Club or Acorn or the Fight for 15 fast food workers. Everybody has to be saying the same thing about basic income in the public sphere. And then you bring your disagreements inside the house. So there needs to be agreement and commitment to what everybody will say together externally. Your methods matter. Traditional and social media is very important. We had a lot of debate inside the Pre-K for PA meetings about the importance of the letter to the editor. I was against wasting time and energy publishing letters to the editor because it's clear people are not reading letters to the editor anymore. They are reading posts on Facebook. So I was an advocate for recruiting active Facebook posters to post our messages for us, right? Basically, we recruited a small contingency of active social media users. We gave them sample messages for them to customize and create an authenticity around it, and they posted them to Facebook. That is essentially the new digital age letter to the editor. And the conversations that are created, if a post blew up, we made sure that the local elected leader was tagged in that post so that they could see how much community conversation was fired up by this Facebook post. Another interesting thing that we did at Pre-K for PA was strategic visibility. If the press and elected leaders were going to be in the same room together, we were in that room as well. And we created a lot of visibility in front of the people who mattered. So we created essentially the illusion of thousands of people in the street by being everywhere that reporters and elected leaders were in the same room. We had Pre-K for PA stickers on every person in the audience. We had Pre-K for PA one-pagers for every member of the press, every staffer of elected leaders, wherever. So it was a highly coordinated, but not it didn't take a lot of manpower to do that because we chose where to concentrate our efforts in terms of strategy and in terms of audience. And then, of course, repetition. I get bored easily, and I hated repeating the core messages because I became bored, but it's really essential that you stick to, core messages that you repeat so often and so frequently in the public sphere that you're bored by them. The last key to success is mapping. This is the 2016 election map in terms of swing between Clinton voters and Trump voters. And the lower the color is, the tighter the race was, so the margin. This is a map of the margins. And you could look at this map as an opportunity. The tighter the margins, the greater the opportunity for a new issue, a bold vision to be adopted by an elected leader or a candidate in that area. So we took advantage. Pre-K for PA was launched with the gubernatorial race in Pennsylvania in mind. We were not a overtly political operation. We were a C3, but we chose counties, and we chose the timing. The political calendar and the political map were very important in determining where we directed our energy. And basic income could essentially do the same thing. You could have very targeted organizing efforts and media campaigns in counties or in congressional races where there's an open seat, and therefore two challengers have a seat open up for grabs, where the voting margins are very tight. Those places in the country will get the most media attention. And if a policy discussion is in that those two candidates, it will get more play. And that's exactly what happened with pre-K. We purposely launched pre-K for PA in 2014, knowing that there was an open race, meaning no incumbent, for governor. So it was an opportunity for a statewide conversation in a highly competitive race, and where people would be desperate to appeal to as many voters as possible. So we played both sides. We were bipartisan, to a point made in an earlier session. We went to Republican gatherings, we went to Democratic gatherings, and we wanted to have pre-K for PA visible in all those gatherings. So mapping really matters, and that helps you build your strategy. These are some of the coalitions I've personally been in leadership positions for. I was involved in a Philadelphia fight to prevent school closings, not advocate for school closings, but in 2012, the school districts, in response to charter school advocate proponents, was trying to close 40 public schools out of 230 or so. So a large percentage of public schools were on the chopping block. It was a fight back campaign. We did not keep all the schools open, but at the end, we cut the number of schools that were closed in half, almost in half, to 23. I've been involved in, so that coalition was retired teachers, the AFT, American Federation of Teachers, parent advocate groups, to your point, kudos, way to go, parent advocates, parent disability groups. Acorn was at the table on that coalition. The Airport Workers Rising was a fight for unionization at the Philadelphia airport among low-wage workers, baggage handlers, bag checkers, people that drove disabled folks from one terminal to another. That involved clergy. We built a coalition of with Unite Here, another union, SEIU, and also POWER, which is an acronym for a faith-based clergy group in Philadelphia. Fight for 15, the fast food workers. I was involved in Fight for Phillies, which is a part of an international, a national effort to push the narrative of inequality, raise public awareness around the issues of inequality, and that was basically launched out of the Occupy movement, which I was also a part of. Free the Weed was about marijuana decriminalization. This brought together veterans, this brought together nurses, oncologists, nurse oncologists, and also comedians. The typical stoners were there too. Like, we were all trying to figure out core messages with the goal of decriminalizing marijuana in Philadelphia. That was successful. We still struggle with racial disparity in the arrests, but the number of arrests is plummeted. It is now a $100 parking ticket. And then lastly, pre-K for PA. There was a bunch of groups involved in pre-K for PA. It's not an organization, it's a coalition, and it has at the table the United Way, the Economy League of Philadelphia, let's see, about pre-K. And there were some, it took us 3 meetings to come up with a name. It's hard work. Coalition building is very, very hard work. And all of these groups had different reasons for being at the table. All of these groups. Mission readiness is all about military preparedness. They were for pre-K because they wanted more people ready to go fight wars. Well, I'm a Quaker. That was kind of hard for me to talk to those folks and their reasons for advocating for pre-K, but we all, committed to the coalition and tried to work things out. Now, the case for my proposal for a Grasstop's advocacy, it's just a proposal. It's woefully uninformed. As I said, I'm very new to the issue. It's interesting to me on a lot of levels because in my work at the Office of Adult Education, I've come to learn about the very daunting levels of functional illiteracy in the country. We have 40 million Americans who cannot read the label on their medicine bottle. This was new learning to me, and it was very daunting because as I was learning about the low skill levels and the number of adults that really cannot operate an Excel spreadsheet and probably will not in their lifetime, coupled with the rise of artificial intelligence, robotic manufacturing, and the theories out there about the decimation of jobs on the horizon was incredibly alarming to me, and I started to look into basic income as a possible solution. So one of the things that's also daunting, and I think this matters to elected leaders, this map is a little bit old, but I think you get the point, and it's to my point earlier about mapping, is that the population of young folks, 16 to 24 years of age, who are not in school and not working, is rising. This is a map of where those problems are the biggest, and I think these areas, if they are swing states, would be ripe. If they are in the Rust Belt, they would be ripe opportunities for basic income organizing. I think that you really do need to think about where is your message going to resonate, and also not to waste time. If you're not having luck convincing your socialist allies about basic income, move on, right? Move on. In this age, you can reach anybody. You don't need to be having an in-person conversation. So this is the thought that I had using the 5 keys to advocacy, basically promoting pilots as a vehicle for advocacy. So gather more American evidence while building the idea into a movement. Embark on 8 to 12 big pilot programs of 500 to 1,000 people apiece. The resources would, I'm asking this group for your first concession. I don't think Congress is going to fund pilots. I think that pilots are best funded by the private sector, philanthropic. So ask them for support for a 3 to 5 year campaign with an honest price tag between the benefits based on median income in various parts of the country. For the purpose of this proposal, I just said the median income for Philadelphia and cut it in half, which is $17,000 a year. Of course, you don't have to give out that much. You can decide. Intentionally build a coalition of influential and committed allies. Define and communicate the problem, the solution, and the action. And choose the locations of big pilots with the political landscape, data, and the political calendar and influential media markets in mind. Right now, it's an idea. Basic income is an idea. It has organizations that support it around the country. But year 1 of a professional coalition campaign with volunteers and staff working together, you would have to recruit core coalition member groups, secure funds for national lead staff, and convene coalition, gain consensus around the policy vision and core values. I'm almost done. Oh, let's move that off the side. Basically, the big question problems are, what problem are we solving and how are we doing it? To Kathleen's earlier point, I'm echoing that. Are we trying to end poverty, or are we trying to reboot American initiative? Are we after social justice, or are we trying to create more entrepreneurs? Is this about American shame that we haven't done right by poor groups? We've had poverty for a long time, and we can work on a narrative of shaming America, or we can tap into a narrative of American pride, American leadership, American innovation, and look at basic income as startup money for innovators and startup money for family well-being. So I look forward to continuing the discussion, and
Go back.
I will look forward to Saturday, is it?
Saturday, yeah, tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you.